Hi everyone, my name is Greg Yao. I work at Zoetis, and I was hired 2 weeks before we went into COVID lockdown at Zoetis, where I was hired to implement PLM. And what I thought would be a relatively straightforward journey, based on my years of experience in the PLM space. I've worked in R&D, I've worked in IT. I went into this thinking it would be somewhat of a rinse and repeat kind of methodology. And well, it turned out to be anything but that. So we want to share with you some important lessons that we learned that I hope that will be good takeaways for you guys to leverage for anyone else in this audience that might be struggling with adoption. Because we all have the same passion for a PLM and see its potential and what it can do for the organization. And in fact, I see some common themes from some earlier presentations. To Kevin's point around adoption, basically the build it and they will come strategy is probably not a good one to go with. To JMA's point around cross-functional collaboration to build your PLM system. So with that in mind, I want to introduce you to one of the most effective collaborators I've ever had the pleasure of working with, Angie Moliterno.
Hi, so I'm Angie Moliterno. I came onto Zoetis right before we implemented PLM. I came from an area that we had Agile for a very long time. So coming in and seeing Propel and how easy it was to understand and use, I just thought it was going to be a great opportunity for Zoetis. And it was definitely seeing a journey coming to light, and it has absolutely been a journey for us.
All right, so Angie and I both come from med device, many years of experience. And one of the things when I went into Zoetis was thinking, okay, med device, pharmaceutical, surely it must have a lot alike. They're both regulated. And well, that's where it went off the rails right from the very beginning. So let me give you a little bit of overview of Zoetis. We are the world's largest animal health company. We were split off from Pfizer, I don't know, about 10 years ago, I believe. So it's a pharmaceutical company. I've talked to some of you in this audience around some of the medications you receive for your pets. And so you're probably wondering, this was not meant to be a PLM for pharmaceutical project. And so we are actually part of what's called the biodevices group. We do nothing with pharmaceuticals except that we inject vaccines into chickens. And so we had a unique need within the organization to use PLM to manage our data. So here's one example of one of our, what they call a device. When I think of device, I think medical device, usually small, handheld, but this is really a piece of automated equipment. It's got more total unique parts and more total parts than your car. I would say it's a mechanical engineer's dream. It's got every type of mechanical component you can imagine, lots of moving components, incredibly complex, incredibly precise. If you eat chicken meat, I guess, chances are it was vaccinated by our product. We have about 99% of the market in the US. They actually vaccinate the chicks while they're still in the egg. So one of the interesting things about pharmaceutical that I took for, I took these things for granted, and you think, well, what does that impact have? The whole concept of design control does not exist in pharmaceutical. So right there, that already sets the stage for conflict when the fundamental principle behind PLM is design control around your product. In fact, when they talk about change for products already on the market, they thought it was quite odd. What do you mean your design's frozen? No, it's not. I mean, we were processing hundreds of change orders, which result in thousands of parts being revised or created on a yearly basis. And so when you have one mindset and the other 95% of the organization has a different mindset, that just sets the stage for a lot of conflict and a lot of resistance. Because the concepts of PLM was not something anyone in the organization was even familiar with. So let's just talk a little bit about Propel. We're all here because we bought Propel, of course. We all have our reasons for it. I'm just giving you my reasons for it. I don't need to sell you on the product. We came from, my experience was with Agile. We loved Agile. And one of the key business requirements was whatever PLM system we come up with, it's got to have minimal IT requirements, infrastructure behind it, which automatically meant it had to be a cloud solution. So we'll talk about this in the next slide, but we had another solution that we started with, and I quickly had to move away from that and into Propel. And I reached out to Propel, and knowing the headwinds I was against, Propel was very helpful with helping me overcome those and address the organization's concerns around security and back-end infrastructure and everything that we had that were unique to Zoetis requirements.
So to follow up on what Greg was saying, so this is our journey. Once we had decided on Propel, the first thing that we went after was parts and BOMs and an integration with SolidWorks. Once we implemented that, then we wanted to go and see about an implementation with SAP, which that was huge for us. There was repetition in making updates to your revisions in SAP, making BOM changes, manual, just wasn't very effective. And then it also brought on the fact of whatever was our validated design now is becoming what was being manufactured. So that was critical too. The next thing that was super helpful with it is it also brought that relationship between our R&D group and our operations team. So now we're starting to talk to each other and communicate with each other. So because we were building that trust, we then all brought on human health complaints. That was to support our quality team. Then we brought on SiliconExpert integration. That was to support our procurement and our operations team to get ahead of those obsolescences. As you saw that piece of equipment, that's something we got to make sure we're staying on top of. Then we circled back around to a process that was already in place. So we had the ECR process, and we had found that we have an assessment section, and we wanted to do it better. So we created our reviewer functionality. Then we also, or I should say in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be implementing our variant BOM order management system. So those two things is where it's shown the flexibility of Propel and Salesforce and what we can do. And then for the future, which is coming up for us, is we're going to integrate with field service.
Yeah, I think if you look at this roadmap, one thing I hope is obvious to everyone is this is an R&D implementation. And if you look at a lot of the things we did after we went live, what can we do to help our partner organizations be successful? We knew they were resistant and in some ways accepted the solution reluctantly. So we knew that we had to build trust and success stories with our partners. Otherwise, we were never going to be successful. And one of the things that, I don't know if it's endemic to pharmaceutical industry in general or Zoetis, but this was really the first platform that was really cross-functional in nature, maybe outside of SAP, for example. And so you're building a change management process, whereas on the pharmaceutical side, it's 100% driven by quality. That requires full partnership across all of the functions. So I think to that end, one of the opportunities I saw was on the field service organization. So that device that you saw, they are leased, and there's a field service, there's a lease service agreement that goes with it. And so, one of the interesting blind spots we had was we have no idea of what the history of that product is as it sits in the field. They can be there for more than 10 years. What is the total cost of ownership? What is the actual reliability of our product? Because these things are leased, if we can improve the reliability, it doesn't improve margin, it improves profitability because customers are already paying a fixed cost on that lease. And so I saw an opportunity within Salesforce. Actually, this is something that Propel helped me with because I was new to the platform. I don't understand what CRM was. I didn't understand the things that it does. And so one of the things that Propel mentioned was, hey, you can integrate this into field service. And as I started to look into it, I was like, yeah, we have some opportunities here. And so as I dug into an understanding of what this platform does, what value can I help deliver to the organization? And going back to a point that Kevin said, hey, this looks all cool, you can integrate all this stuff, but what does it do? I mean, if it doesn't drive any value, then you just built something no one's going to utilize. So, I had to spend a lot of time understanding, what their problems were. They don't come to you and say, here are my problems, we want you to solve it. There's a lot of digging in and understanding what they have to struggle with. Because in many cases, they accept whatever it is that they have to deal with as normal routine business. So what I saw here is an opportunity to say, hey, how can we measure total cost of ownership? How can we drive reliability? How can we give visibility into the customers that are having issues? So for example, in today's world, if we have a part that's obsoleted, of course we can do where used on the bill of material. But what if we haven't built that product in a long time? Do we need to not get to it? Well, how many customers is it impacting? Well, we have no idea. But with this field service setup and using the asset management linked back into the account records, we can now navigate that and figure that out. So now we're driving much more value and putting the right resources into the right areas for the business. Because all of us are sitting here and we know that you can never have enough resources. It's always about prioritization. And the squeaky wheel is not a very effective business process. And then on top of all that, we thought about other ways of adding yet more value, where we can now tie validations in the field into this as well. So we can say, hey, you actually did the initial validation at this customer on this date when the machine was configured to the state. So extremely helpful information when you look at history.
So circling back to our PLM and ERP integration, there was additional things that were helpful there. One, making sure everybody understood PLM was a source of truth. Using the system the way it was designed, so PLM is where you're making your changes in your records, SAP being your transactional data. The other piece to it all was also making sure that our teams were understanding what it meant to be in SAP, how it works for manufacturing. So again, building those relationships with our operations teams and making sure that we're all working on this together. The other thing that was really helpful is we've also set up some security in SAP. So now the BOM that you approved in PLM, you can't modify it in SAP. You have to come back to PLM. So making sure everyone understands that getting the information right in the first place so that it integrates to the second place correctly.
And another benefit to this, when you build these interfaces, naturally you now have to reconcile your data in PLM to SAP. And in our case, we realized not only did that data have to be reconciled, but the drawings weren't necessarily reflective of what was actually on the BOMs. And so this was actually creating issues for our manufacturing partners running MRP, which is basically putting a demand against the components as they go schedule builds. There would be shortages. So this made their life difficult because they're held accountable to material usage variations and build schedules. So if we can make these more accurate, it's going to help everybody, and it's going to help everybody win.
So similar to what you've heard from others that have spoken before us, just to give you some ideas of where we started and what we thought of in our approach. It's really just looking at what are those top pain points. Are there any metrics that you have that you're trying to improve a process? Are you trying to improve a process in another way? So we had a colleague say, oh, I'm going to do this workflow, and it was in another system, and come to find out that had they used that other system, they weren't leveraging the parts information, the protocol information. Future state would be our accounts. So by putting it in PLM, they've now leveraged all that other data for them. So being aware of those conversations and trying to leverage people to come to PLM or Propel. The other thing is, do you have something documented that's well documented? Maybe it's a paper system. We try to look at those and get those into the system because it's already written down. You've already figured out what's going on, and it's kind of a quick win. And then just in making sure that you're having that conversation with your colleagues and making sure you're, as a team, figuring out what's going on. So it's not just for us, R&D, it's what's going on with quality, what's going on with my procurement team, and looking at what they need and what everybody needs, and seeing if we can come up with a solution together. So I always say start small, because when you go for a really large project, that just turns into a lot of data to review, a lot of training to do, a lot of processes to develop, where if you keep it simple, it's easier to digest. So your users are gonna be able to see the value of it, they'll be able to take it in quicker, and then it also lowers your risk in the sense of not so many processes coming through, not so much data that you've got to validate. It just makes it easier to see those wins and to get through your processes and pick up the next one and keep going.
Yeah, I think you can also think about this from an agile perspective or boiling the frog in the water kind of perspective. Change management is a challenge. And so this is one way, this is one strategy of adopting that. If you take smaller chunks, it's a lot more easier for people to digest than bigger ones.
So once you have it in place, just keep going. So what do you do next? So now you've got Propel in place, you've got dashboards, you can see metrics, you can see areas where you've got bottlenecks. Now that you've started that communication with your users, listen, get that feedback. So that can start driving, maybe you've got a user that's really excited about it. Do they have a process that you can put into the system? Are there any processes that are similar? So like that reviewer process that I mentioned, we're doing that on our ECR. Well, we have deviations that has the exact same need. So it's a quick win because we've already developed it. We just now need to build it into our workflow for our deviations. And then while you're looking and talking to other people about what do you do, what can we process next, just keep an open mind that you might see something new or something better that right now, this is the thing I want to go after. So just keeping that in mind as you're trying to discover what you're going to do next.
All right, so some key lessons learned from us, some additional ones, I guess you could say. The continuous learning is one. So we did the classic train before a go live, never to ever train again, basically kind of thing. And that, that works for a few months after go live, but quickly starts to accumulate as people forget, because maybe they're not exercising the system right away, and of course, any new hires. And so we ended up hiring a dedicated resource to manage not just the training, but the communication and OCM aspects of, introducing change, because we're constantly changing, constantly adding or improving our processes. And so this actually does a couple things. It's not just training people on how to use the tool, Propel. It's training people to accept the business process as it exists. As I mentioned earlier, the whole concept of design control in a pharmaceutical organization was very foreign. The whole idea of R&D actually being involved in a post-release process, again, that was just driving more headbutting. And so, it's kind of like we're finally in a stable place. People come here from a different organization. We want people to fit in and onboard as quickly as possible. So this training is also a part of training the culture of what you want this organization to act and be like. Another one that was really key that we came across early on is speaking the same language. So let me give you a few examples. Owner. I believe it was Kevin who was asking who owns the digital thread, and of course the first thing that came to mind was this kind of story of what owner is. It means too many things to too many people, and when you're having a conversation of who owns what, it was never resolving any agreements at all, or disagreements. So an example is, I remember one specific example where early on when we were butting heads with quality, she was explaining that quality owns the design history file, and I'm like, really? Risk management, I could see that, but Quality doesn't do any testing, verification activities. That's all R&D, on and on. Well, as she walks through and explains it, what it turns out is that what she meant was she owns the controls around the repository for the design history files because quality is on the one that's on the hook for an audit. So obviously it's got to be in a controlled location. So what that told me was, oh, she's got a stake in this, and we need to make sure that she is assured that whatever solution we have in place meets her requirements for control. So here we were thinking around process and ownership of design changes, and it was actually something completely different. Another example, I'll just give you one more example here, change control. And again, I don't know if this is unique to pharma or Zoetis, but what quality calls change control Zoetis is not what I would call it. I think change control, like in you're updating parts and BOMs and documents, a change order, change request. For quality, it's pretty much any quality activity you can possibly think of. Process validations, CAPAs, deviations, audits, batch hold, everything that quality is involved in, they call it change control. So when you're having a conversation and you're talking about change control, they're thinking, what is R&D doing in my sandbox? So that automatically, but it's not something that we realized immediately. It did take many, many conversations and much conflict to realize that that's what that was going on. Because, and it kind of goes, and if you combine own change control together, even better. So that was a painful lesson. And so when I come across those things, I just avoid the word altogether. And just explain exactly the scope of what we're talking about and agreeing on scope and who's responsible for what. And that went a long ways to help resolve misunderstandings. And then the last one is on scope. You mentioned this earlier, scope creep, something I think every project deals with. Really doesn't matter if it's a PLM project or your product. Scope creep is always a challenge, and you really need to keep a check on that because when it comes to, in my opinion, software is never done, perfection will never be achieved, and you at some point in time, if you keep trying to change your requirements to perfect, you're never going to get there. And in some cases, it may not be a right or wrong answer, it's just a preference. So you need to put a line on the ground, get this thing live, and then just accept that, hey, I'm going to monitor this process, engage my stakeholders, and think about continuous improvement and where the issues and challenges are so that you can get it going. It's much better to get it going and up and running and make agile changes later than to drag it out. So this was wraps up kind of a high-level summary. For me, learning what Salesforce does for your company, I think is one, in my opinion, that's probably underappreciated. After learning about Salesforce, this is after I've already adopted Propel, I realized that since it sits on this platform, it would behoove everyone here to understand what Salesforce does for your organization. Educate yourself, meet with your commercial sales team, customer service teams. What are they doing with that product? And there's some benefit there that you can start to tie PLM, Propel into it. I mean, that was the whole premise, one of the major premises of Propel, that being on that platform. It wasn't just, hey, it's a standalone app that you can do with it. And we've seen over time Propel introduce more features and functionality to link in other parts of Salesforce into your processes that you can do on no other PLM platform out there. So take advantage of it. And there are Propel resources that will help you. I certainly have tapped into it, and I've learned a lot. It also helps you learn a lot about the business. As I said, they're not going to come to you with the problems. You're going to have to find them. And that's being curious about what the company does and how they work. I think another classic one is just the upgrades, enhancements. The pace of Propel's enhancements are really, in my opinion, they seem to be picking up over the last year or two. And if you delay those upgrades for 2, 3, 4 years, I think you're adding risk. Because rather than doing it in small chunks, you're going to do one big one, and that's a lot of configuration changes to keep track of and test as you migrate and back into production, assuming you follow SDLC practices. It's much better to do it in smaller chunks, not from a risk perspective, because when I say risk, it's because the scope of your changes are smaller, so therefore the risk is smaller. You might miss something in an upgrade, but if those upgrades consist of 10 series of upgrades, there's a bigger risk that you could miss something, as an example. Not to mention the features and functionality you get with the upgrade. So I come up with a way and a schedule and a routine of just following into an upgrade process. Do you want to talk about the process ownership and how you manage that, Angie?
Yeah, so what we do today is we actually gather feedback. We have people come in and give us information. We have a Jira project that we keep track of what's going on. So as users are asking for things, we try to lump things together, keeping in line with the Salesforce changes for our site. So it's still the whole process of reaching out to those colleagues, working with them, and the same old, what's in it for me. So finding out what do they need, what are their challenges, and then addressing them and seeing how quickly we can get them addressed.
Yeah, that what's in it for me I found was the key one. And it can be really hard to think about what's in it for me. So I'll give you a good example of what I mean by that. So as an engineer, we all respond, generally speaking, or at least like to think we do, to data. The data is going to tell us what decision we need to make. But you will find that people, when you're trying to change their minds around or convince them, in this case a .plm, data is not going to convince them. So don't fall into that trap, because I did, and I generated as much data as you could possibly imagine, and it didn't matter. Did not matter. So a good example of that is if you tell a smoker that smoking is bad for you, there's certainly plenty of data. Do you think they're going to suddenly stop? No. And so you got to find out what's in their self-interest, and it requires more digging in, more conversations, more relationship building, and trying to see things from their perspective, something that you do really well, and basically being, a neutral person and just taking the time to listen. And then you prioritize, and how do you prioritize, Angie?
So we definitely speak to our users. We find out where the risk is. Obviously, the high-risk items, they've got to go first. So it really comes down to the risk. How quickly can I get something done? If it's simple, low-hanging fruit, go knock it out. But yeah, and then it's first in, first out, same old, same old. So obviously, someone asked for something today. I don't want to wait 2 years to give them an answer. So yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone, for your time and attention.